Hey everyone, my name's Chris Collins. I'm the head of science at Moodoo Health. And today I am joined by Mitchell. He is a sports nutritionist. He has got a master's in sports nutrition and he's been doing this for about 5 years now. So today we're going to talk about muscle building supplements, and Mitchell is going to go through his top 5 muscle building supplements. So Mitchell, I'll leave it to you.
Yeah, all good. So I'd say, just to start things off, supplements, basically, the word supplement's a bit of an ugly word, a lot of people like to say, because it's kind of gives it the term of like, it's just an addition to what you're currently doing. But I think it's more than that. It's just like, they're basically made of compounds that are made for enhancing things like performance and various abilities. And you don't often find these sort of compounds in food, or you don't find enough of them at the very least in most foods. But I'd say in terms of bodybuilding, one key one I'd say is, just to start off, is creatine. I mean, it's dirt cheap, really easy to get access to. The only drawback to it, I'd say, is probably how it doesn't mix very well. But even then, you can get micronized creatine monohydrate, and even that way, you can ingest it really easily. Goes with most things, and it's just great ATP turnover, so it's amazing and has a massive effect on how you train. Caffeine as another one, a powerful nootropic that I know Chris will have a lot to say about this, but powerful nootropic and obviously can have a massive effect on how hard and how well you train and how much focus you'll have on a particular workout. I notice myself it does, but there can of course be some drawbacks based on like when you take it, maybe your genes, just like Chris will come on to. Yeah, and I'd say another one would be taurine. I mean, taurine I think can tie in well a lot more with particularly professional bodybuilders, because it can have it can offer a therapeutic promise for preserving testicular health, which is key for those who may be taking exogenous anabolics, as they can have a massive effect on testosterone turnover. And then I'd say another one would be vitamin D3. Vitamin D3 can be a bit of a tricky one, based on what your dietary habits are and what time of year it may be. For example, throughout the winter, I recommend most people should really be taking a vitamin D3 supplement due to less exposure to sunlight. But those who may be vegan or follow a diet where they may not consume oily fish, eggs, or organ meats, vitamin D3 supplementation you can get from lichen, which is a moss. And I know I use this particular supplement in one of my studies back at uni with my masters to assess the effect on strength. And this supplement had a massive effect on strength. And despite it was a vegan product, it still had a very similar effect to those that were not vegan, were from animal sources. Which ones have I missed? I mean, there's so many I can go through.
There's 4 right there. So we've got whey protein. You haven't mentioned any protein types.
Whey protein, yeah, whey protein's a shout. Whey protein's definitely up there. It's just, I think protein's a good one to have just in your back pocket in case you were to need it. But I do recommend ideally get a lot of your protein from diet initially. And if you do come to a place where you physically cannot get any more in, I think protein, just for strictly fitting your protein goal, is a brilliant supplement. There's nothing wrong with that at all. Easy to digest, and you can get it in loads of different forms. You can get casein, which is a slightly more slower digesting protein that can be good taken at night, which is another topic. You get beef isolate, which is good for those, like Chris was saying previously, with those who may be lactose intolerant. You can get whey isolate as well, which is amazing. You can get all kinds of different forms.
Yeah, that's it. I mean, creatine, I think everyone knows, everyone knows about creatine, right? So it's a standard supplement that most athletes are going to be taking. Now, there is some interesting things about creatine. People say you should take a loading dose, for example. What do you think about that?
Yeah. I mean, the loading dose is around 20 grams a day, 10, 20 grams a day?
Yeah, I remember back in the day, they used to make you say, oh, you have to have your 15 grams a day. 10 days or 2 weeks or whatever, and then you can go down to your 5 grams. I mean, I've never really stated that to people. I've always said you could just take 5 grams a day and eventually you're going to reach the same limit anyway.
Exactly.
So I mean, I suppose taking 15 grams a day, if you've never taken it before, will get you there faster, to saturation point faster, right?
Yeah, of course.
Cost you more money though, so
yeah. But again, creatine is quite a cheap supplement. So, I mean, if you're going to load anything, it'll be creatine, I'd say. But me personally, when I started with creatine, I did load and I did notice a bit of a difference, but I wouldn't say it's needed, because like you were saying, you can still get to that ideal level without loading. Because your body you can't take too much creatine. Your body's just going to excrete it either way if you take too much. but once it hits that threshold. But yeah, I think in terms of, I'd say that's my number one supplement for anyone that wants to build muscle in any way at all.
And do you just take creatine year round? No cycle?
Year round, don't need to cycle it. Yeah, year round, all the way through. You can take it any time of day as well, because your creatine levels will stay the same throughout. Even if you miss one day, they shouldn't drop too much. So if you take the 5 the next day, they should be perfectly fine.
Yeah, and I remember back in the day a few years ago, there was a lot of supplements, creatine supplements coming out with all fancy things connected to them. Like there was Ephelester and there was other ones. What do you think about all that? Are you just creatine monohydrate all the way, or do you believe that some of these other ones may have some more beneficial effect?
I think monohydrate's the only one I've really ever taken, because that's the one that was mainly marketed to me from the start. In terms of the particular mechanisms behind it, I'm not quite read up on that as well, because it's just something I've always done. But yeah.
Yeah, creatine's a big one, right? So if you're not taking creatine, you probably should be if you're trying to build muscle in any kind of power sport. It's probably beneficial for even endurance athletes, and there is some cognitive benefit as well from taking creatine. We have done some studies which showed that creatine had a more beneficial effect when doing a memory test. So people who took creatine had a beneficial effect pre and post this memory test that we did. On the Moodoo app, we have got cognitive games, and creatine actually is very beneficial for cognitive health as well. So, it's not just a bodybuilding or muscle building product. It has a lot of benefits. Cool. Then we have caffeine.
Yeah.
Caffeine obviously is a big one. Every most pre-workouts have caffeine in. However, there are genes and people who are sensitive to caffeine. So it's very dose dependent, right? So when it comes to pre-workouts, you'll find that they vary dramatically in how much caffeine they have. So you got from about 100 milligrams all the way up to sometimes 500 milligrams. I think I've seen some really strong ones. Having more is not always better with caffeine.
No.
You need that right amount, right? You don't want to be rushing to the toilet quickly, because caffeine can make you want to go. So that's one thing about pre-workouts. If you've never done taking caffeine before you work out, start off with a smaller dose, I would say, see how that benefits you and work up from there. We actually did a study of caffeine a while ago, because we're looking at a gene called ADOR1A. And this gene actually caused anxiety. So people with certain genotypes, they had anxiety after taking caffeine, even at quite a low dose. So that was around 150 milligrams. But if they were to take maybe 75 milligrams, they actually got that benefit, that ergogenic benefit. But that's probably too low for most people, because most people who are working out, that 200 probably is a sweet spot. But there are variations in people. So don't just go off what your mate's doing, always go off what's giving you the most benefit. So that's really key of caffeine, and caffeine will make a difference. And we actually tested press ups, and, the ergogenic aid of caffeine actually really benefited people in knocking out a few more reps. And that would probably have crossover to, whatever it is you're doing with weights, for example.
Yeah. I think another honorable mention definitely for supplements, I'd say, would be multivitamins. I think a lot of people tend to turn their nose up to them purely because they think like, oh, a lot of that's water soluble anyway, so you're just going to end up excreting what you don't need. It's a bit of a waste of money, really, and you're not being specific to what you need.
Yeah,
I think some of them, I did a bit of looking in the background of like some genetic stuff, and you can get some that come with certain genetic polymorphisms. So you can get one that could be, I think it's ACTN3, that's more suited to fast twitch muscle fibers, and it could be more so it can be more commonly found in fast twitch fibers, so it can allow your muscles to fire more rapidly in those who may have this, so they might be more suited to bodybuilders. And I think by taking supplements like that, you can just have a massive effect.
So you have something called epigenetics, where taking certain supplements actually allow for an increased expression of a gene. One of those genes that we can look for is ACTN3. So what you're talking about in polymorphism is like an inherited trait. So you're born with the polymorphism, and that's called RS1815739. And that's found in ACTN3. And that supposedly, inherits you to be more likely to have fast twitch muscle fibers, right? There are many other genotypes which are associated with power, but certain supplements can actually improve the methylation levels on certain genes, allowing them to express more, and you will actually benefit from doing that. But one of those is creatine, that actually has an effect on a gene called MSTN, which controls myostatin levels, and lower myostatin levels are related to higher muscle mass. Another supplement that can do it is from chocolate. So there is a chocolate extract, basically, and that can actually benefit myostatin levels again. That's called epigenetics. And so that can actually cause methylation of the gene MSTN, which means that your body produces less myostatin and therefore more muscle mass. So epigenetics is another one. So taking a multivitamin is a good way of sort of covering all bases.
Yeah.
What do you think about something like a greens drink rather than taking a multivitamin?
I think a green drink, yeah. I mean, again, it's like covering all bases, really. But I mean, like I was saying before, I think it's important to firstly consult your diet and make sure that you're getting your greens and your fruits and your grains in at first, and then perhaps do something like some blood work or some kind of genetic test to see which areas you could be lacking in.
Yeah.
And then address that with a greens drink or a multivitamin, for example.
Nice.
I think they're definitely marketed more towards people who are slightly less likely to spend tens of over £10, £20, £30 on a specific supplement, purely because then they know, like, by taking this supplement, I know I'm covering all bases.
Yep. Yeah, sure. You mentioned taurine, and that's something you don't really hear many people mention.
No.
Can you go a bit more into why you think taurine is such an important supplement for muscle building?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of taurine, you see it a lot in the bodybuilding world because, of course, it's an area where they use certain anabolics and stuff like that to increase their ability. And taurine is a good mitigator in that because it can have a therapeutic effect on testicular function, which is at risk, of course, by taking these exogenous anabolics. I think that's the main reason what attracted me towards it. But it can have various other effects. It can just be massively beneficial to those who need to gain power. They have better recovery. You can have just overall better workouts and train harder, just like what everyone wants from the various other supplements that we were discussing, like creatine and stuff like that. But it can get to a point where you get into those niches like taurine and you kind of start to cancel out other supplements in a way. You can start doing a bit too much. So like taurine takes up the role of what creatine should be doing, and it can just get a bit blurry. So I think getting down to the specifics could only be done by those who do carry out certain genetic tests and stuff like that, and are advised to take those sort of supplements, I think.
Yeah. I mean, I've got maybe a couple of honorable mentions. One would be beta alanine. Now, you find it in pre-workouts, but people take it wrong because you're supposed to be taking it daily. So I normally recommend about 3 grams a day. And what it does is that it allows you to just push out a few more reps if you're doing, it's like your drop sets, your supersets. So anything going over a minute or so of energy expenditure, it allows you to just push out a few more reps. And I have found that personally myself, when I started taking the beta alanine at around 3 grams daily, after the first month, I was able to really push those drop sets, for example, where, sometimes the set might last a minute and a half. And it really benefited me in terms of that kind of rep range. Now, that's not going to be for everybody. If you're doing powerlifting, if you're doing, you're doing normal rep ranges and the sets are lasting 30 seconds, 45 seconds, it may not be that beneficial, but it's quite a cheap supplement. And it's in pre-workout because it gives you tingles. It's not going to benefit you just taking it as a pre-workout. If you're taking it once or twice a week or 3 times a week, it's not going to benefit you doing that, but you need to take it daily to see that benefit from that.
Cool.
So definitely beta alanine is a good one. I mean, you mentioned multivitamins. There are some other supplements out there. The honorable mention, what can we go for? I mean, a supplement that people, like I say, that they shove it to the side and say it's no good, it's L-glutamine. Now, L-glutamine for most people is going to be fairly useless. However, it has got a very niche requirement in some people. So if you suffer with IBS, I recommend just trying glutamine out. 5-10 grams a day, 10 grams preferably as part of a shake, for example. It may help with the IBS. If you find that you get bloated a lot, again, maybe try the glutamine. Also, if you are on a really restricted diet and you're finding that you may be overtraining or you're getting injured a lot, try the glutamine out. So it has a very niche area, but I have seen good results from using L-glutamine when it is required. For most people, it's not going to be that important, but for some people, it can really be quite beneficial, especially those with the stomach issues. I found that L-glutamine can be quite beneficial.
Okay. Yeah, that's definitely a good shout.
Yeah, so I mean, we've got some interesting ones in there, which I don't think people normally think about. I mean, you say that taurine is used quite a bit in bodybuilding, but you often don't hear people actually mention taurine. You know, you don't hear it on podcasts, for example, where people say, oh, you know, they say creatine, protein, for example, vitamin D, but they don't often mention taurine. And I think glutamine, again, is left on the wayside quite a bit, but it has got some very niche properties which can be quite beneficial. Another one that I don't see people use a lot is a supplement called P5P, which is actually vitamin B6. And now what it does is it actually helps reduce prolactin. So it can be really, really good for males who may find that they are getting like gyno, for example, but it's not caused by estrogen, it's caused by prolactin. And taking P5P can actually reduce that. And those puffy nipples sometimes males get, and P5P will actually reduce that quite dramatically. People don't talk about that much either. People don't talk about prolactin that much. So again, that's another supplement which only has a niche need, but for someone it could be really beneficial. And I think that's the key with supplements, right? You do have those catch-all supplements like creatine, like protein, where you're going to get a benefit regardless, right? But I think there's loads of supplements out there which are niche and benefit an individual, but may not benefit everyone, right? So like your glutamine, like your P5P. Can you think of any other supplements which may have a niche need?
In terms of niche, I mean, I think one that's kind of come up recently that I've started taking personally is cod liver oil.
Yep.
So it's basically got the same benefits essentially as omega-3 fish oils. However, it's got that added vitamin A, which can be massive when increasing muscle mass. That's quite a well-known thing. Mm-hmm. It's massively required during protein synthesis. I mean, that would definitely be the top of my list for the next one.
Yeah. I mean, vitamin A is an interesting one because vitamin A is actually one of the most dangerous vitamins, basically. In terms of the fact that it's a fat-soluble vitamin like vitamin D, but it stores more rapidly and it can be quite dangerous in high dosages. But there is a gene variant called the gene's called BCO1, and having a genotype in this gene actually causes you not to be able to break down beta-carotene correctly. And when you can't break down beta-carotene correctly, you can't convert it into retinol. And for example, if you're vegetarian or vegan, you may not be taking in that much retinol because it's normally found in animal products. And your main source of vitamin A will be beta-carotene, so your carrots, etc. And if you have that gene variant, you're probably not breaking it down. Now, a lack of vitamin A can lead to all sorts of issues. And one of them is poor skin health. And we have found that acne, for example, is worse in people with the gene variant in BCO1. We did a study on this a while ago. And that was because of vitamin A. But when they introduced vitamin A into their diet or from a supplement, their skin started to recover. So vitamin A is a really good one, obviously, when it comes to lifting weights and, say, bodybuilding, for example. Acne might be an issue. And obviously vitamin A in that case is going to be quite important because, you don't want to have your body ruined by acne because, again, it's all about the looks, isn't it? It's about the aesthetics. So vitamin A has all great benefits, but it is a dangerous supplement to overdose on. So I mean, that's quite a few in there, quite a few good suggestions, I think, for people. trying to think of some other ones which are out there. I mean, what do you reckon to these natural testosterone boosters?
I think they're quite interesting, to be fair. One of them I keep stumbling across is that testosterone.
Yep.
That seems to be listing up quite a little bit. I think they're definitely really good, just alternatives to, of course, taking some quite aggressive androgenic steroids. Purely because they don't bind to the androgenic receptor, so you are less likely to be getting those bad, terrible side effects that you could end up getting from proper anabolics. But I think some of the data, some of the studies, obviously, are still quite unclear. There's still not quite so much on them in terms of especially long-term effects.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of debate around whether you should cycle them or something like that. But yeah, I think they could have a massive. They could be massive in this industry of bodybuilding if they are found to be a much more safe alternative for just the average person, because the average person shouldn't really be taking a lot of the stuff that bodybuilders are taking just to look decent at your local gym.
Yeah, 100%.
And if they are successful, then yeah.
I'll tell you what, there's one supplement which is called phosphogenic acid, and it doesn't really get any attention. And there was a study done which showed that it increased strength by around 12%. And we've done a study with it as well, and it actually had great epigenetic effects on genes which are associated with power. It seems to be perfectly safe. And what it does is it activates something called mTOR. And whilst activating mTOR, activates it in a few parts of the body, but it activates it in the muscle especially. And that increases protein synthesis and increases that ability to build. And it seems to be really powerful, but it gets no attention. You can buy it. There are a few companies which sell it. I don't know why it doesn't get attention, but from the studies we've done, and from what it can do, and it's pretty much side effect free, it's a really powerful natural supplement. I would say it's more powerful than something like testosterone, which testosterone has actually been around for many, many years. It's just gained popularity recently. It's not really a test booster per se, but it's supposed to have anabolic effects on the body, like a steroid will, without causing any hormone-based issues. I would say phosphogenic acid is a big one. Another one is epigenetics, which again, reduces myostatin, so that's really beneficial to building muscle, beneficial to any athlete. And again, it's fairly cheap. It's also side effect free, basically. So I think there are some actual things out there which don't gain attention, but I don't know if it's to do with marketing, which influencers got their hands on it. For example, there are probably a few factors which are, which are involved in these kind of things, right? But yeah, I don't know if you've got any more. Feel free to.
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, I think we've actually covered all bases. To be fair, I've got a list here. And yeah.
You're happy. Perfect. Yeah. Okay, well, nice one, Mitchell. It was good to talk to you. And we'll probably do a part 2 to this, maybe, with some of the studies that I've mentioned before. And we'll maybe focus on one of those niche products and see what the studies show and if it's worthwhile people spending their money on them.
Yeah, no, yeah, definitely. Yeah, like break them down properly and have a look at the data. Yeah, sounds good.
Right, I'll catch you in the next one.
All right, see you later.